each day that I come, they have a different setup. Last time it was this kind of big table here with a...
I think Alexei tries to do that for you. He tries to put...
Yeah.
Maybe he...
I guess... Well, I guess I'll stand this time. I hate to be so far away from you. But I guess there's something about the camera and the sound system and all of that. So the old man will be standing. How is everybody? Good to see you, Mickey.
Nice to be here.
Things all right? Yeah.
Started? I'm started.
What?
I'm going to give you this because you're here.
Yeah.
I just filled this out for you.
For me?
Yeah.
You have a stone chapter for a second. The series is going to continue.
Okay. Any questions, guys, that you are thinking so far on what we discussed, or anything else that you would like to ask or make a comment, and before we
I just wondered why we do so much repetition in new stuff. It seems like there's a lot of repeating what we've already done.
that we already done, like in,
And cicadas.
yeah. So why does so many repetition? Basically, Musaf, each service, there's a lot of repetition. It's you do almost the same thing with some variation. So Musaf is a service on its own, based on the temple time when there was additional sacrifice, right, for Shabbat and for holidays, and so there is a service.
Standalone, I see.
Standalone. The only difference is because it's not morning and evening, so we don't do the Shema service. So all this section from start for the Baruch Hu, all the way to the end of the Shema service, that we don't do. So we just start right ahead with the Amida. And the repetition all the time. You look at the Psalm, you just repeat on the same theme a lot. Where God is King, and how we should love God, and I should keep all the. If you want to summarize all the services, probably a couple of sentences. God is great. God is our King. We are His kingdom, and we should love God with all our heart and do His commandment. What else is there, right? This is the essence. But because we want it to be, we want really to believe in it and to feel it and to that kind of commitment, then it should be repeated, and it should be last, for at least sometimes. You just say one sentence and you go home, then it won't stay with you. It is something that stays with you, that keeps you going. Then,
Can I sit up here?
Where? Right here? Well, the thing is, it's about the camera. I think if you sit here, you almost it's going to be the only one, doing this. But that's okay. You can sit there. Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, I would sit if it weren't for this camera, I would sit kind of maybe on the step just next to you because I don't like the distance so much. But so I don't know who else wants to come. Jackie and Harvey are usually here. So last time we finished just before the Amidah, just before the Shmona Esrei, as it is known sometimes. And so let's see, we are going to start שחרות לשבת, קריאת התורה, נשמת כל חי. שמע, תראה לשלום. צור ישראל. Okay, so you all have, right, so we're going to start on page 159. 159. So it is said, I mean, the headline here is Tfilat Amidah. Of course, Amidah from the word la'amod is to stand. That's the meaning of the word Amidah, I mean standing. However, it's also known as Tfilat Shmona Esrei. Shmona Esrei means 18 in Hebrew. Number 18 is Shmona Esrei. Why do we call it 18th? Why do we call it Tfilat Shmona Esrei? Because how many blessings are there usually in the daily, or in the daily Amidah? How many blessings? You want to say 18, right? But it's not true because there's 19. And the reason why there's 19 is that that's kind of a later addition. And we know that that with some old resources, like the Cairo Geniza, there's actually still 18th, but there's one, but later on, one of the blessing, hello, come in. We're just beginning to talk about Amidah. Or as you say, Harvey, Shmona Esrei. But you know, Harvey, that there's not really Shmona Esrei, it's not really 18 blessing, right, Harvey? You know that it's not really 18 blessing, there's 19. Yeah, right. And so one of the blessing was added that's Tzemach David, when we talk about a little bit of Messianic times. However, how many, so actually there's never 18. There's 19 on the daily prayer. How many blessings are there for Shabbat? 7. What are the 7th? So, in almost all the variation of the Amidah, there's first 3, which are almost unchanged. There's the last 3, which are almost unchanged. What is changed is what's in the middle. So 3 and 3. So there are 13 daily, in the daily service, we ask for this, we ask for that, we ask for wisdom, we ask for God to forgive us, we ask for rain, we ask for sustenance, all this blessing that we ask for stuff. Shabbat, we don't ask for anything. Why? Because Shabbat is the gift that we need. There's nothing else is needed. So there's only 7. There's 3 and 3, and then 1. And that's true for Shabbat and for holidays. So, and I'm going to go over this so you understand what I'm talking about. However, there's some services there's more than extra, like the one in the middle. For example, on Rosh Hashanah, Musaf. I don't know if you remember this. In the middle, there's 3 long sections, which is called Malchuyot, Zichronot, Shofarot. Each of them we blow the shofar after each of them. These are 3 blessings because they all end with the Baruch Atah Hashem. So this, instead of this one that we usually have on Shabbat and holidays, on Rosh Hashanah, Musaf, we have 3. So let's go to and see what they are.
Cantor, is it possible for you to get closer to the mics?
The mics. Oh. Is that better, Arvi? Much better. The first blessing is called Avot. That's the name that was given to it because it talks about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it ends with Magen Avraham, and I'll talk about the variation in a minute. Magen Avraham is on page 160, and then comes another blessing, which is called Gvurot, that ends with Mechaya Metim, the revival of the death. That's the end of the page. And then comes Kedusha, which is the 3rd blessing. Okay, so the Kedusha, holiness, is the 3rd blessing. And with the end of the page 161, Baruch Atah Hashem Ha'el HaKadosh, the holy. And then on page 162, 2nd paragraph, this is a special blessing for Shabbat, Yismach Moshe. And you see the next paragraph, talk about Shabbat, and quotation from the Torah about V'shamru, and in the middle of page 163, that's the end of this blessing for the Shabbat. Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat, who sanctified the Shabbat. And then we go to the last 3, okay? Retzeh, and then Modim, and then Shalom, peace. Okay, so these are kind of the general structure, yes? Yeah. Okay, so first issue that I want to talk to you briefly about is, now I'm going to go back to page 159, and we're going to go systematically for each of these brachot after we understand the general structure. You see there are two options on page 159, one of the right-hand side, the left-hand side. One of them is just talk about the patriarch, and the other one talk about matriarch, adding the matriarch. And when you hear me, sometimes when I lead, you see that I choose to do the patriarch only. I don't add a matriarch. And the question is, Cantor Vitells, you're such a liberal person, you're egalitarian. Why? How come that you don't do the imahot? Of course, the imahot, the Majak is all much later addition. It doesn't exist in Orthodox Sidurim. But, and I can tell you only why I do what I do. And of course, when you do it, you just choose whatever you feel comfortable. As I told you, for me, what helped me to focus and to try to rise, to elevate everything is with the help of these Kabbalistic ideas and how the world of God is, as it reveals to us, it has kind of stages. Either you can call it chambers, or you can call it sphirot. And then if you want to kind of elevate yourself, you go from one sphira to the next, or one chamber. You can either think about of going high, or you can go inward. Same idea, basically. So you go from one stage to another. The Kabbalists used or saw the patriarch Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob not just as a certain person who was our patriarch, but they saw it as a stage of the revelation of God to us. So start with Abraham. Abraham is this sphere of love and chesed. And then go to Isaac. It's just the opposite side, the sphere of gvurot, which of gvura, which is the sphere of boundaries and laws and order and all of that. This is the two way that you can balance the world. One is just pure love, but we cannot sustain a world just like that. Although sometimes there's a song, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, there's a song like this, the people, a world of Chesed will be built. There's a song like this that sometimes we sing. However, it's very nice because that means world of love, but we cannot, we live in a world that has to have some rules and some boundaries and some order. And this is Isaac. And Jacob is the combination or the merge of these two, the right balance. And Jacob is the sphere of Tiferet, is the central element, the central sphere in the structure, and that's where the name Yud Hei Vav Hei is associated with. So when I personally do that, I see this kind of structure, and it helps me to rise, to elevate myself. So it's not, because for me, if I just said, Baruch Atah Hashem, Eloheinu v'Eloheinu v'Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, if it's just kind of person, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, what does it have to do with me? Yes, that's the Jewish ancestor, but the worship is a personal thing. When you pray, your soul is trying to rise to God. So that's why I personally do that just with the patriarch. But of course, I think nowadays you have to be politically and gender neutral. Yes, sir.
I just wonder when let's say the Shemot Esrei was put together, composed, was this idea of Sphirot there, or was that something that was juxtaposed upon it after it was written?
So that's a very good question, because the question is what's the origin or the roots of the Kabbalistic world, or the Kabbalistic ideas of the Sphirot. So as such, talk about the Sfirot, that's, there's also some debate where exactly it was started, but mostly in Spain in the 14th century, 13th century also. However,
Which century?
13. However, there also some kind of mystical, what you call mystical literature that were during Talmudic time. And this is what we call the literature of Heichalot. Heichal means chamber. And so in that writings, there is kind of description of that you go from, in order to reach, to be fully in the presence of God, you have to go from a chamber to a chamber to a chamber. And each time there's an angel guarding this chamber, and you have to prove yourself worthy, and then you go to, so these ideas were definitely during Talmudic time also. But not in the final form that we know it from the Kabbalah of Spain, the Zohar, that came from Spain, and then later the Kabbalah of Ha'ari from Tzfat. So to answer your question, most likely the wording of this prayer came before the Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah based their structure on what's written in the Torah. If you read some Kabbalistic literature, you see everything is based on some verses that they found either from the Torah or from later writings, from the prophets and all of that. So, and nobody asking you to use the Kabbalistic imaging. It's just, for me, it's just like a tool. It's just helpful for me to, to feel that I pray more deeply,
So that's why they email, that's why there's so much controversy about whether email should be answered.
So originally it was without Imahot, until recently. I think only the last century, I don't know what, during the 50s, 60s, they started adding it. Only the more liberal branches of Judaism, like Reform, of course, and conservatives. But until today, if you go to an Orthodox synagogue, you use their Siddur, there's no Imahot. Harvey?
Personally, I grew up in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so I'm really familiar with the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob thing. But morally, ethically, whatever, it's much more important to include the women as well as the men. I just don't do it because I grew up in that,
Yeah.
in that kind of
It's got a certain rhythm
chant
to it.
Yeah.
that includes Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeah.
But it excludes Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, etc.
Yeah.
Rachel. But I do believe that they belong in.
Okay.
I was just wondering when you feel the Shemona Esrei was codified. I mean, 10th, 12th century, 13th century. 15th.
No, the Shemona Esrei? No, that was codified. That was written in early the few like first and second century, but there was variation at that time. The Siddur that we know that more or less is the same. The first one is Amram Gaon from Babylonia, 9th century, and then Saadia Gaon, which is more like even more what we're doing now. That's the 10th century. Just one word to try to answer Harvey. it depends on your point of view, what you want to do when you come to pray. Do you want to feel personally how your human soul, is going to get elevated, or you also want to take into account the Jewish people, the history, and the current kind of situation. Well, women, of course, should be equal, but these two different point of views. When I pray, I don't feel that that I'm praying as a male. I feel that it's just a human soul, or if you want, Jewish soul, trying to elevate. I think it's beyond. If you, in my opinion, if you start to think about politically correct or morally correct or whatever, all this element that comes into a prayer, to me, it's element that keeps me down. I don't, because the prayer is beyond male and female. I mean, you want to try to elevate yourself above the level of your body and mind. So that's my point. But I respect, and I know that the majority of people do want to include, the matriarch. I understand that, and I respect that. But if you hear me praying and I don't do it, just so you understand why. Okay, so 159, Baruch atah Hashem Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, you know what it means, Elohei Avraham. So when I say Elohei Avraham, oftentimes you see me do like this, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, and Elohei Yaakov. Abraham is on the right side, it depends how you look at it, but it's the Chesed, this Chesed and this Isaac and this Jacob in the middle. And then Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah, this is, if you remember when the El Elyon, that's, I think, the early Torah with Abraham meets the kings of this battle, about 5 kings, and one of the king blessed Abraham, and he told him, Baruch Avraham El Elyon, or Kohen El Elyon, something like that, I don't remember exactly. But these ideas of El Elyon come from the Torah. El Elyon, the word Elyon means superior, on top, it's from the word Al. Gomer Chasadim Tovim, the one who bestowed us with good graces. Vekoneh Hakol. Koneh, in modern Hebrew, means to buy something, liknot, but here it means basically that God owns everything, that everything is God. Zocher Chasdei Avot, and remembers the graces of the fathers, or if you want, also the mothers. Umevi Goel, and the one who will bring Redeemer. Livnei vnehem leman shmo be'ava. So the Redeemer of the Son, and the Son, that means they actually talk about the future, and you see that infused in the prayer, there always this idea of Messianic time. Especially remember that was done after that was written after the destruction of the Second Temple, and so Jews ask themselves, what's next, So they revised those prayer, and there was this idea became stronger and stronger that the Biat Mashiach will come and restore everything to what it used to be. And then the end of the blessing, Melech Ozer u'Mashiach, again, kings who helps and save us and defend us. And then the blessing, Baruch atah Hashem, Magen Avraham, shield of Abraham. Why it sort of end only with Abraham? after earlier talks with Isaac and Jacob? It's a good question. I think because Abraham is just the earliest stage of of God revealing himself, in the world. Abraham is the first stage. And so that is the source of everything. And you have to guard that source, Magen Avraham. Then comes the second blessing, which is called Gevurot, but the blessing itself, Baruch, at the bottom of page 160, Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayeh HaMetim, which is very sort of a deep and something confusing statement. Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayeh HaMetim, God who revived the dead. Well, this is a major point of beliefs of the Jewish tradition, Tchiyat HaMetim. The 13 principles of Jewish, but that written by the Rambam. So these are the 13 elements of Jewish belief, and then which is sort of making it to more like a poem with the piyut Yigdal Elohimcha, that sometimes we end service with, and it also ends with Mechayeh HaMetim, Tchiyat HaMetim. And not only that, it is the last word before the holiness, before the Kedusha, is Mechayeh HaMetim, revives the dead. So, if we want to make it meaningful for us, and that we say it without hesitation, what do we mean by that? I mean, do we, there's this kind of simple, in a way, popular belief in the old Jewish world that when the Mashiach comes, the dead will come out of the graves and walk to Jerusalem. And that's why the cemetery, in Jerusalem, it's on Mount of Olive. And it just kind of, if you stand there by the cemetery, the old city of Jerusalem is just in front of you. It's, the man, there's a valley, and then the walls of because people really wanted to be buried there, to be short distance. They don't have to walk so much when Mashiach comes, So, but, okay, so that was the belief. I think we are a bit more modern in our understanding of the world, and so what do we make of this? What is Tchiyat HaMetim? I'm asking you, because you say it every day or on Shabbat, when you daven, when you pray, Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayeh HaMetim, the one who revived the dead. Any ideas?
Maybe now metaphorically.
Sorry?
Maybe now metaphorically.
Metaphorically, which means like,
Soul
you're kind of dead spiritually, and now you want God to revive our spirit. That's a reasonable and a good way of looking at it.
I've always had trouble with this one, to tell you the truth.
Yes, of course.
I'm not trying to be funny, but sometimes it's better if you read it in Hebrew. Even if you understand the Hebrew, you learn so fast you don't pay that much attention
Right.
to what you're actually saying. But I like the translation that they put here.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of, I guess, who gives life to the dead, and I think that could mean what Allison said. It could mean
Yeah.
anything. It could mean, you remember your translation, and I don't know, that's all.
Okay, all right.
I do the same thing, I just go right through it.
Right. Okay, you can do that, of course. But I think if we sit here and we try to not to do that, not to go just because it's there. So there's something here.
Quick question.
Yes.
Am I correct that whatever I'm not denigrating the Rambam, but there is no doctrine that you must believe, other than maybe that you got that God gave the Torah or something like that. But to be a practicing religious Jew, you must believe A, B, C, D.
Right.
Or is there?
I think it's a good question. From what I know, there was these 13 principles of the Rambam were not accepted, universally. I mean, that was his ideas, but it's not. It hasn't become like, I don't know, like the Ten Commandments or something that we all of us follow exactly. So yes, it's not. There were rabbis and people who did not accept it as these are the principles. So here's the blessing from.
You're saying you don't have to believe in reincarnation. It's not required. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that you don't have to believe in anything that you don't want to believe.
But maybe God,
Depends who you ask, right?
Right, and especially I don't know if you talk to the people in the Orthodox world, they'll believe strongly in whatever written there. It doesn't. They don't have any doubts, or at least they don't express them.
There's no catechism. A Jew's a Jew. If he's a Jew,
A Jew is a Jew. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a big question. Who is a Jew? It's not always.
but according to most of us, if we declare yourself a Jew, then you're a Jew.
I agree with that, but not everybody. Agree with that. Yes.
This kind of thing is, well, it's easy for me because I'm new.
Yeah.
Because I can easily say, well, I can't get a grasp of this part, not only in mind, but in spirit and in kind of spiritual understanding.
Yeah.
But I may at some point.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So you can look at anything like this, I think, as
Yeah.
being kind of aspirational.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
You'll learn something, you'll grow, and the understanding of this will come to you in time.
Yeah.
well, you're not supposed to learn about the Kabbalah until you're 40, right?
Yeah. That's right. That's tradition said that you're not supposed to start studying the Kabbalah before the age of 40, and because there's some concept there that if you're not mature enough, that may kind of distract you, and you won't be able to really get into it.
I thought it was because the big Kabbalists died in their 20s, so they figured make it up to 40.
Here's the Torah blessing after you have your aliyah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, who gave us Torah of truth, v'chayei olam nata betocheinu. So what does it mean, chayei olam nata betocheinu? Forever life or permanent life planted in us. Right? And when we say it, not always we pay attention to that.
Just
No, I'm just reading here from the blessing of the Torah. Yeah, so it's not right where we are in the book, so we just kind of at the Torah service. So I'll read it to you slowly. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, who gave us Torah of truth, v'chayei olam nata v'tocheinu. Chayei olam means permanent life. He implanted, nata, lintoa, is like to plant. Okay, so nata v'tocheinu, as if took life itself and planted in us. So, at least according to this blessing, there's something permanent in us. You know, we always said that that our soul, that there's some element of God in our soul, right? Well, we know that God is permanent, so there's something in us which is permanent, right? So it's not so. If this is the question, then what? What happened when we die? Right? What happened to this element that's supposed to be life, eternal life? For me, exactly, again, I just have to tell you the way that I see it, so it's that I don't have any doubts, or I don't have any, I don't have just to go over it without thinking, is that the concepts of birth and death are concepts of this world. There are changes that are happening in this world. But if we agree that God is beyond time and beyond space, then God is beyond changes, because changes always take place in time and in space. So God is beyond changes. God is unity, right? Unity cannot change. Unity is unity, is oneness. So when we say Mechaya Metim, maybe, you can look at it as a hint to the idea that actually in the level of God, there's no death. So if you elevate yourself and come to the presence of God, at that moment, there's no death. Of course, when you come out of this situation with this prayer and you go back into the world and you deal with changes in the world and your family, and of course, there are life and death and birth and all of that. But this is not the ultimate. In the ultimate, there's no changes and there's only God. And there's no death, because God is permanent. And so maybe that's a hint to that level, because I always was intrigued why this is Mechaya Mitim was written just before the Kedusha, the holiness. That's, if you take the whole services, you approach like the temple from the outside. First, you prepare yourself with the Psukei de Zimra, then you enter the main courtyard, and then you start with the Shema, and then you approach the real holiness. Not the Holy of Holy, that's only the high priest, but the other space, when you really in the presence of God, and that's what holiness means. It was where you come to holiness, to the Kedusha. At that moment, maybe the concept of death sort of dissolve. It's just in the presence of oneness and wholesomeness. And so how can you still maintain the concept of death if you are in front of the permanent? And, that's how it helps me. I see a lot of doubts in your faces, and that's absolutely fine, because that's each of you has to, I think, struggle with these concepts that are written here. Or if you don't, if you said maybe understand that God willing, the Mashiach will come in the future, or maybe I'll eventually grow up into it, or maybe I cannot, maybe I'll just go to the next page. It's fine, you know? We are all doing the best we can.
Well, was that a progression for you over time?
Over time means long time ago. Because for me personally, it was, I had a bit different path. Because when I was very young, I didn't, I grew up in Israel, and there was you either could be Orthodox or secular. There was no like in between at that time. And so the Orthodox world was not attractive to me, but I had kind of this spiritual surge in me. So in the early 70s, like everybody else, I was looking around and I find myself in India. And so those concepts about the truth and the permanence of truth, and there's, in that level, there's no life and death, or birth and birth and death. That idea I already I was exposed to. And so but later when I returned, when I came back to Jewish life, and I asked myself, how do I understand those words here in the prayer? Then I was somehow introduced to the Kabbalah, and I said, it's pretty similar. What I learned there, I can see it's written right there in the Kabbalah. So for me, it was that kind of path, that I reached it, and that's why the Kabbalah is important for me. And but each person has its own path. There are as many paths as there are human beings. Each person has its own. If at all, a person is interested in some kind of spiritual progress, then it has its own way. Someone do it through pure heart. Some people do it through Torah study. That's the way. That's the way to connect. They go and every day or every week they do a Torah study and like that. That's a good way also. So there are many, many ways of doing it. So we come to the Kedusha. This is the third blessing. And if you just, from page 161, you just flip to page 162. And you look at the first 3 lines of 162. And it's Ata Kadosh, you're holy. Shimcha Kadosh, your name is holy. Ukdoshim b'chol yom yihalelu chasela. And those who are holy every day will praise you. And then the blessing, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. This is the Kedusha. This is the Kedusha when you recite the Amidah silently. And of course, you remember that first we do it, that's the tradition, that we do it first silently, the whole thing, and then we repeat the whole thing. In modern, Reform or conservative, oftentimes we don't do that. We just start out loud from the beginning of the Kedusha. But until recently, even in this synagogue, we would do first everything silently, and then when you do it silently, you just do these 3 lines. This is the blessing of the Kedusha. However, when then we repeat it out loud, the Kedusha gets expanded. And one of the reasons I think that when the Kedusha gets expanded, and soon we'll see what's in the Kedusha, is that, and that one of the reasons why we do prayer in a community, in Kihla, that if you pray by yourself, you're able to create certain strength, atmosphere of, between you and God. the more people around you who do the same, you double the strength, and it's all it's like, if you want to create a source of energy, of heat in the desert, you put all these mirrors around, and they all kind of, and they shift, and they take the sun's rays and they reflect it to one point. So can you imagine that each mirror do a little bit, but together they create a center that can rise to thousands of degrees. So the more people are here who are seriously doing it, not chatting, and walking around, but they really focus, the strength is there. And so when you do it in the group, out loud, and you feel this strength, then you expand the Kedusha. Because then the Kedusha, as expanded, can be more, people can grasp it. People can see it in all of its strength. We already, when we looked at the blessing after the Shema, actually, so the blessing before the Shema, the first blessing is called the blessing of Yotzer, and I don't know if you remember, there is kind of sort of a mini Kedusha in there. And we talk about the elements. Almost the same elements will be repeated here, but in a bit a more expanded way. So, we'll start from the beginning. Nekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, we are going to sanctify your name in the world. Each word here, I can talk for at least an hour. What does it mean, Nekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam? We are sanctified your name in the world. We make the whole world a reflection of your name, of your essence, right? Nekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, keshem shemagdishim oto b'shmei merom. In the same way that it is sanctified by the heavenly, like the angel, the heavenly creature. As it is said, kakatuv nevi'echa, as it is said by your prophet, v'kara ze el ze ve'amar kadosh, 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 Adonai tzvaot, melo kol haaretz kevodo. Where is this from? It says, kakatuv nevi'echa, as it is said by the prophets. Which prophet said that? Isaiah. Okay, so Isaiah, in his great vision of the celestial scene, where they, when he saw like the presence of God and how all the celestial creature kind of around, and they're all so enthralled by the presence of God that they all turn to each other and say, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. They experience this sense of holiness. Melo kol haaretz kevodo. The whole earth is filled with his presence. This might be time to pause a little bit and talk about holiness. What's the word kadosh? What does it mean? Holy, but what does it mean? So, there's some confusion there. And that's because of Hebrew. Hebrew is sometimes complicated. There's an understanding that kadosh means separate. If you read some, rabbinical or whatever, kadosh means separate. And it's based on some Hebrew grammar. Because what's happened with Hebrew grammar is that you take a verb, and each verb has 7 ways of conjugating him. Not one way, but 7 ways. It's called in Hebrew binyanim. Binyan means like building, but binyanim, 7 binyanim. So, the same verb, the same root, if you take it from one binyan, may mean different thing when you shift it to another binyan. For example, I'll give an example. There is the verb lishbor, shavar. That's meant to break. So we say, ani shavarti, in the past, ani shavarti, ata, singular shavarta, at shavart. That's the conjugation. Then that's, and then another binyan is what we call PL. That means shiber, ani shibarti, ata shibarta. That means that's same meaning but stronger. The shaber means really break with oomph, you know. But there's another binyan which is called ifil hishbauti. And you remember Joseph was hamashbir. He delivered all the grains and all the food to the people when there was a famine. He was the champion or the chief of all the stores of the storage of. So he was hamashbir. So this is suddenly a different meaning from the same verb. The word kadosh, there is one of these binyanim which is called hif'il also, which I can say, ani makdish lechazman. I set aside time for you, lehagdish. Okay, and that's maybe from where an understanding that that kadosh means separate. I put aside something. There's also in the world of the ancient world of different gods and all of that, or this one of the worship, if you call it worship, was the prostitutes in the temple. It's in the Torah, and that's a prostitute is called Kedesha. And even there's a story in the Torah, I don't know if you remember, when Judah went to a prostitute, and she's called Kedesha. Same root. So can you imagine from what we consider holy and a prostitute? But that's the way Hebrew is. That from the same root you can create sometimes different meanings. So you're welcome. So I don't see. I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense that kadosh means separate, because we come. Remember, we come here to the center. After all this, we reach the sanctum of the temple. That's where we feel the presence of God. How can it be separate? It's against anything that I feel that the whole worship means. So, to my point of view, kadosh is not separate. Kedusha, holiness, to me, it means the expression of unity. When you suddenly face with the sense of that everything is actually part of a big thing of oneness, then you suddenly feel a sense of holiness. And so I just wanted to mention that when you talk about Kedusha, if you ever heard that Kadosh means separate, that is not necessarily so. It can mean actually the opposite. It can mean it's uniting. So we talk about Ezekiel, Isaiah. There come another section. Az b'kol ra'ash gadol adir v'chazak, and then with enormous sound, great and strong voice is sound, and some celestial creature put himself above the seraphim, and they say, Baruch Kvod Adonai Mimkomo. That's the second paragraph. Blessed the presence of God from its place, Mimkomo. What's Makom? Makom means place. Why does it say, what is the place of God? Baruch Kvod Adonai Mimkomo. Blessed the presence of God from its place.
Before we move on from here, what's the translation for Tzavaot?
Tzava mean army, in modern Hebrew. When you talk about Hashem Tzavaot, that's one of the name of God. I don't know it necessarily means that the God of armies, but the Hebrew, that's the meaning of the thing. So Makom, it's, one can say, again, according to the Kabbalah, that Makom means the top sphere, really the place of this total oneness. That's where God's presence starts to be revealed to us. And then, Mimkomcha Malkeinu, from this place of you, of the oneness, please appear before us. This is actually a real prayer, because until now we just described the awesomeness of God. Now we actually pray. We say to God, please appear to us and rule over us, because we've been waiting. Ki mechakim anachnu lach. Matai timloch v'tzion. When are you going to rule Zion? Bekarov be'ameinu. In the near future, maybe in our day, forever and ever, you should dwell. And then it ends. It ends kadavar ha'amur b'shirei ozecha, as it is said in the poems of your strength, al yedei David Mashiach, by David. And what does it mean here? What are the songs of David? The Psalms, right? And indeed, the next line is a quotation from Psalm 146. Imloch Adonai leolam, God will rule forever. Elohei Tzion, the God of Zion, ledor vador, for generation to generation, hallelujah. And then this is sort of summary of the whole thing. Next paragraph, which ends with the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh, the holy God. And that's the end of the third blessing, the kedusha. And then comes for the main or the special blessing for Shabbat. It does not appear in the daily, of course, daily prayer, when it talks about how Moses brought the Ten Commandments down from Sinai, and in these 10 Commandments, the laws of Shabbat is written.
When we say the silent prayer, we skip this bracha, right? We don't say this.
What? What don't we say?
Third bracha, when we're davening.
Yeah.
silently,
Oh,
we don't say this at all, right?
no, when we daven silently, we skip the whole page. The whole page, 161. We only say the 3 lines on page 162. This is the kedusha that we say, that the only thing that we say when we do silently. So on top of page 162, when you start Ata Kadosh or Shimcha Kadosh, that's what we say when we say silently. And you're right, when we say it out loud, we skip that, because we already said a bigger kedusha, more extended kedusha, and there's no need to repeat this, the top of page 162. right? That's one. That section, this 3 line, we said only when we say silently. And then V'shamru b'nei Israel, this is what's written in the Torah, V'yom hashvi'i shabbat v'inafash. Okay, there's still a lot to talk about, of course, but I think the best is to do it a little bit at a time, so we have time to digest and to think about it, and so we will not be overwhelmed by this. And that's number one. Number two, I think maybe we are going to take a pause for the rest of the summer. It's July, it's August. I'm going to be a new grandpa, God willing. Thank you. Her due date is this coming Sunday, just the same day that I have this little ceremony here. So I hope that that I still be able to come here.
Are we going to meet next week or no?
No.
Okay. Well, when we do this again, could we please pick a different venue, because I lose so much of what you're saying to the acoustics.
I do too.
Okay.
We need
So
to be around a table like a seminar.
I did not choose this. The bosses thought that they wanted it to be streamed. And the only way so far in the synagogue to be streamed is through that camera over there. And so that is why we're doing in this fashion. But I will tell the people, express your wish, and my wish also, to do it in the library or something like that. In the chapel and library or whatever.
Classroom where we
Oh, classroom.
Torah study. Because we have
Yeah.
streaming from there. Or not streaming, I guess, but we have Zoom available. Zoom.
Right. But apparently they wanted this to be not on Zoom, but on streaming, so they can, I don't know. I'm not.
But, the big boss says, אנחנו מסכימים, we all have to understand, right?
Yeah.
That's what the big boss says.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming, and I appreciate your. Baruch Tiyeh.
I have a quick question for you. You probably covered it when I wasn't here. How come we don't stand for Shema? Did you cover that?
Well, I did, but there are many jokes about it, actually, why we don't.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, well, the joke was like this, that synagogue and somebody asked, why are we not standing for the Shema? So somebody said, ask Moshe. Moshe is here for the very beginning, and he'll tell you, why. Because here there's a debate, So you go and ask Moshe. Moshe said, no, that's, at that time it was exactly the same debate. Because there's no, you're absolutely right, that instinctively you think you should stand for the Shema.
I would think so. Yeah, it's just like,
The custom somehow evolved to the fact that you don't stand for the Shema.
yeah.
I don't have a good explanation. I don't know that anybody has a good
This was
explanation.
originally an Orthodox shul, so maybe
Orthodox, I've never seen.
Never, they don't stand for Shema.
No, they don't stand for Shema.
Reform temples, they stand for.
And before maybe. Yeah.
Well, this was originally an Orthodox shul. So the Orthodox don't stand for Shema.
But the question is, it's like a major prayer.
Right.
Usually we stand for the major
learning.